Okay, so mates, we're going to start by making the skirt and the shirt. Later on, we'll move to the jacket. Okay, so this fabric is for the skirt, and I'm going to be cutting the skirt. I folded into two for the front parts. From waist to my hip, I marked waist to the knee, okay, and then waist to the full length of the skirt where I want it to stop. So I'm going to rule a line across that part, the length of the skirt, the knee length. It is very necessary you get the knee length before the length of the skirt, and then the hip line of the skirt. Okay, now I'm dividing my hip into four, and I will mark whatever it gives me. I will add 1 inch for stitch allowance. Now the waistline, I will divide my waist into four. Whatever it gives me, I'm going to add 1 inch stitch allowance. Here I did not add that allowance for this. Now I'm going to come down by 0.75 and I'll connect it to my waistline, the waist measurement. This is to remove any bulge below the stomach area. I hope you understand. Okay, so I'm now going to connect from the waist to the hip. I'm going to connect from the waist to the hip, and then whatever it is I have on the hip line, I'm going to minus 1.25 because I don't want it to be tight. I'll minus 1.25 inches and mark on the knee side. You can do minusing 1.5 and connect them together. This is to tighten the knee. Okay, you can do 1 inch also depending on how fitted you want it to be. So whatever I have on the knee, I'm just going to mark it straight. This skirt is going to have a slit at the back of it. Okay, so like this, now we are done with the front part of our skirt, and I'm just going to cut it following the mark of the chalk. Tada, we are done. So I placed it on another folded part which is going to serve as the back, keeping 1 inch allowance for the zipper area. Okay, 1 inch allowance for the zipper area. Now the only thing is that coming to the upper side, I'm going to raise the back up by 0.25, just 0.25 from where I marked the front. This is the waistline. I'll raise the back 0.25. Okay, so I'll connect every other thing together. Then at the back also, I'm going to add 1 inch from where the waistline stops. This is going to serve as my that allowance. So once I do this, I'll connect it 6 inches down, which connects to the hip line. 6 inches down. I hope this is understood. I hope it's making sense to you. So that is the only alteration I'm making for the back, and every other thing will be the same. Okay, so this is it for the back. Now this piece I have will be the band, and that is it. Now for the shirt, I folded my paper into two because it's going to be an asymmetric shirt. So I'll mark 3 inches for the width of my neckline and 3 inches down for the depth of my front neckline. All right, whatever I mark, I'm going to use my marker to highlight it so that it becomes clear to you who is watching. Now my shoulder divided by 2, it's going to give me 7.5, which is 15 inches. I'm going to come down by 1.5 inches. Okay, for my shoulder drop down, and I'm going to use my ruler to connect it together to the 3 inches neck depth, neck width, and then from there to connect to the 3 inches neck depth, 3 by 3. You can see the way it is. Okay, so from my shoulder line, I'm going to mark my bust length, which is 10.5, what I'm using. I'm going to mark my waist length, okay, which is about 17 inches. And then I'm going to mark the length of the shirt. Of course, I'm using the whole length of the paper. So I'm going to rule this all through the bust and the waist. Okay, I'm using the full length of the paper. In fact, I might add something to it to extend the length of it because it's not that long. Now from the bust line, I'm going to come up by 1.5 inches. That will serve as my armhole line. From the bust line, I'm coming up by 1.5 inches to get my armhole line, and I'll rule it this way. Okay, so whatever it is I marked at my shoulder line, I'm going to mark it at the armhole line. Then at the bust line, I'll divide my bust into 4 and mark. Divide my waist into 4 and mark. And then the length of the shirt, my hip, divide by 4, and I'm going to mark. Okay. I also marked my bust divide by 4 at the armhole line before connecting it straight to the shoulder line. Just keep watching. Now you're to add your ease allowance. You're to add ease allowance to this. You can add half an inch, you can add 1 inch so that it will be a bit free on you. Okay. Now there's something I need to show us. If I connect this the way it is, it's going to look more like a fitted blouse. You can see how the waistline dips in. I don't want it to dip like that. This is a shirt, so I'm going to make it in such a way that every part is free, even though it's going to have some kind of shape. So I'll connect the bust to the hip line on a straight line the way it is, following the measurements. Okay, now at the waistline I'm going to go in by 1 inch just to give it a definition, but it's still going to be free because what I have there is more than 1 inch. Okay, if it's not up to 1 inch, you can just do half an inch if you want it to be really free on the waistline. Okay, I hope this is understood. And then I'll connect the armhole line. So to get the straight line for the armhole, like I was saying before, this is what I will do. Right, mark the same thing for the armhole and connect them together. This is more like making a basic bodice. Okay, I will go in at the middle point by half an inch and I'll connect it this way. I'll connect it like this, touching the half an inch, touching the shoulder point, and touching my bust divide by 4. And this is what we have. Now the next thing, there's no bust dart. The shirt is not going to have any darts. What I'm going to do is to find my bust span, but this is not necessary. So if possible, you can just avoid it. Okay, because we're not going to be sewing any darts here. I just wanted to use it as a guideline so that I can shift my button allowance, my placket, since the shirt's button placket is shifted to the left hand side. It's asymmetric, and that's why I'm using the paper. So the neckline for the back is just 1 inch and I'll connect it. I just want to use here to show us. I'm going to cut the back separate, just the normal way we cut a back bodice. Okay, like I was saying, this is an asymmetric. I've transferred everything like so using the um what is it called again? I've forgotten the name. So I'm getting the midpoint of my paper, but you know how to get to this point. I trust you guys now. So I'm getting the midpoint of the paper and I will shift the placket by 1.5 inch to the left hand side. You can decide to do 2 inches. I did 1.5 or 1.75. 1.75, yeah. Okay, so I shifted it to the left hand side, meaning that my button is not on the front, it's not on the CF directly, it's shifted to the left hand side. Okay, so this is just the only thing that you need to do. Shift it to wherever I want it to be, and that is where the placket, the buttonhole is going to be. So like I said, the dot line is not necessary. All right, now all we have to do is to cut it the way it is. So this part is the left hand side and this is the right hand side. So the way I placed it, that is how you're going to place it on your paper, open like this and cut. All right, you're not going to be doing wrong side and all that. So just place it on the right side direct and put your same allowance. So I'm just going to cut. You can see the way I've cut this part. I'll cut this also. All right, so we are cutting the other side too, the neckline, and this is it. So the midpoint now is where we're going to add our allowance for the buttonhole and the button folding. Okay, so this is it. Now I've added the allowance, 1 inch for button allowance and 1.5 for folding over the button allowance. This is the back side, just basic bodice. This is the right hand side. You can see the allowance I added for folding the button area, and this is the left hand side. You can also see the button I added. So we're going to be joining them together. I'll fold that part like so for a button allowance. I'll join shoulder to shoulder, side by side, and then we'll fix our button and fix to the back side also. All right, so I'm going to be cutting the sleeve. The sleeve is just the basic sleeve, just the basic sleeve. I was actually managing this fabric, but thank God it was enough for the shirt. So I folded, got the length of the sleeve. I'll get the length of the sleeve. I want to make it straight. Okay, now the sleeve has a cuff, right, a band on the wrist side. So I'm going to minus the length of the band, which is about 2.5 inches from the length of my sleeve. So whatever is remaining is the length of my sleeve. I'll come down by 4 inches from the cap of the sleeve, and I'll add my armhole allowance, armhole measurement, okay, plus 1 inch seam allowance, and I will use my cuff to connect it this way. We know how to cut a sleeve, right? That is just what I'm doing here. You can just use your free hand and cut it whichever way and it's fine. But this is what we've got. So beautiful. I hope you're even understanding what I'm saying. Okay, at the wrist I use 6 inches because I want to have a little pleat around there. Right, I did not use my actual wrist because I said I'm marking out, I've cut out the band for the wrist. All right, and this is me connecting it to the 6 inches because it's going to have some plates. So all we do now is to cut it out like so and like so. Okay, now I've joined everything I said I was going to join. So for the neck band or collar, I'm going to measure what I have at the collar. I have about 17.5 inches, so I'm going to be using this to cut the collar. This is an stay that I'm using, so I folded the stay into two, and from the part that is folded I'm going to divide 7.5 by 2, 17.5 by 2, whatever it gives me. I'm going to take my measurement around there, and then from there I'm going to go up by 1 inch. I'm going to go up by 1 inch. So once I raise that part by 1 inch, from that 1 inch I'm going to connect to the midpoint of my paper, and from there I'll then mark the height of my collar. All right, we've been cutting this collar all the time, so by now I believe that we all know how to cut a collar. And then I'm just going to place it on my fabric and iron, and then attach to my shirt. Okay, this is it, and then I sew them together, and this is how we come about it. You can see how different the color is.